Hello, and welcome to Capacitors in Combination Circuits Part 3. During Part 1 and Part 2, we discussed for capacitors simplified as series circuit and then for capacitors simplified as parallel. This time, we're going to increase the number of capacitors. We're going to have 6 and it's going to be simplified as series circuit. So, ito yung mga given, tapos dagdagan natin, no, kasi 6 na pala sila. Nakalimutan ko i-type. C5 will be erase ko lang. C5 will be equal to 5 times 10 raised to negative 6F. And then C6 will be equal to 6 times 10 raised to negative 6F. Again. So let's begin. The original circuit looks like this, and notice na medyo komplikado na siya, no? Ayan. So meron tayo dito C2, C3. Identified na natin yan na series yan kasi isa lang yung dinadaan ng wire. Okay? Tapos itong C4 tsaka C5, series din kasi isang wire lang yung dinadaanan. And then, pag pinang-combine mo na si C2 tsaka si C3, they look like they are parallel to each other. Okay? Tapos, mako-combine pa yan and so on and so forth. No? Later, papakita natin sa simplification. So first, again, titingnan natin yung easily identifiable na connection. And here, yung easily identifiable connection natin, na sure tayo, is C2 and C3, tsaka C4 and C5. We know that they are in series. C2 is in series with C3, and C4 naman is in series with C5. So, pwede tayong mamili sa kanilang dalawa. And I chose the C23, itong nasa taas. Kahit ano naman unahin nyo, okay lang, no? So, I'm going to combine C2 and C3. That's going to be C23. And then I'm going to write down the equations that characterizes this connection, no? And since C2 and C3 are in series with each other, we use this equation, yung may raised to negative 1. Tapos, ang mag-i-equal sa kanya ay yung charge. That's why we have Q23, the charge on Q2 and 3 when combined, and equal yun sa Q2, yung charge sa 2, at saka Q3, yung charge naman sa 3. And then we have B23, since this is, again, series, we add them together. Okay? And may pagbusina po. Sana hindi nyo narinig. Ayan. So, after the original circuit, original circuit, pinag-combine natin si C2 at si C3 doon, no? So, sa simplified circuit number 1, magiging isa na lang siya. Ito na siya. Ayan. Tapos kanina, alam din natin, sure din tayo na C4 and C5 are in series with each other. So, ito naman yung next nating isi-simplify. And we will call this combination as C4-5. Okay? Ayan. And then we will characterize this connection as well using the equations for series circuit. We have C4-5, the capacitance when we combine C4 and C5. And then gagamitin natin ulit yung may raised to negative 1. Tapos mag-equal ulit yung charges. At mag-add together naman yung voltages. Okay? Ayan. And then next, since hindi pa to yung final, di ba, medyo komplikado pa siya, hindi mo pa ma-identify kung series ba siya or parallel, although alam naman na natin dahil sa title, pero we assume kung hindi ko sinabi na series ang kalalabasan nito, hindi ka pa sure kung anong connection kasi ang complicated pa niya. So, isi-simplify natin sa ulit, and it will look like this. Ayan, we're in, magka-combine na rin C4 at saka C5. And then looking at C23 and C45, it is obvious that the connection of this two is parallel. Okay, si C23 na pag-combined at si C45 na pinag-combine natin kanina ay in parallel naman pala with each other. Baka series yung nasabi ko kanina, hindi ko natandaan, no? Ayan. So nakaparallel sila. And dahil apat na yan, ayan, medyo komplikado na, no? So pwedeng gawin mo dito C23-45. Okay? So pwede rin namang tuloy-tuloy na, no? Ayan. So since the connection is parallel, our C2345, which is the combination of C23 and C45, will have an equation for capacitance that is C2345 is equal to C23 plus C45. Hindi C2 plus C3 and so on and so on, ha? We treat as one yung C23 tsaka yung C45. Magka-combine na sila. And since parallel ito, yung nag-add together ay yung charges, tapos yung nag-equal naman ay yung voltages. That's why for voltage, we have V2345 is equal to V23 and equal din siya sa V45. Okay? Ayan. So kung yung sa part 2 natin hanggang simplified circuit number 2 lang, ito, hindi pa tayo sure kung yung simplified circuit number 3 ang magiging final at simplest form ng ating circuit. But this one, hindi pa to pwedeng maging final. Kasi nga, sa isang series circuit, meron pang nakapaloob na parallel. So, i-simplify natin further. Ayan. So, we have C1, tapos we combine na C23, tsaka C45, kaya naging C2345 na siya. And finally, we can say that this is the simplest form of our circuit. Kasi alam natin at obvious lang tingnan na series na siya. And because of that, because this is the simplest form, we can already use the total variables. Okay? Yung equivalent capacitance would be, ayan, you imagine it na tatlo lang yung capacitors niya. Tapos naka-series, kaya ganito. Tapos notice, we treat as one na yung C2345 in all aspects, in all factors. For the Q total, we have Q sub T is equal to Q1. Ito siya. Tapos equals din siya sa Q2345 and equal din siya sa Q6. Tapos ang mag-add together naman ay yung voltages. Ayan. Okay? Now that we are done with the circuit analysis, let's proceed to the computation. So, okay, step number 1 natin ulit, solve for the equivalent capacitance. Starting with the capacitance equation that we will find in the original circuit, which is this one. Tapos, next naman ay yung C45. Doon naman sa simplified circuit number 1. We substitute the given. So, makukuha natin ay C23 is equal to 1.2 times 10 raised to negative 6 farad. For C45 naman, 2.22 times 10 raised to negative 6 farad naman. Okay? Siyempre, hindi pa natin nakukuha yung equivalent capacitance. So, more pa. Ayan. Next naman, doon naman tayo sa equation ng capacitance na makikita natin sa simplified circuit number 2 naman to. C2345 plus C is equal to C23 plus C45. We're going to use the things that we have solved for C23 and C45. Tapos yung equivalent capacitance naman ito. So, nasolve na natin, inad lang natin, and we have C2345 as 3.42 times 10 raised to negative 6 farad. And then, for the equivalent capacitance, we just substitute everything, and we get 6.85 times 10 raised to negative 7 farad. Okay, so accomplish na natin step number 1. We already have the equivalent capacitance. Now, let's proceed to step number 2, which is solve for the total charge. And since nakuha na nga natin kanina yung equivalent capacitance, tapos given naman yung total voltage na 24 volts, we just substitute and we get the Q total as 1.64 times 10 raised to negative 5 coulomb. So, let's proceed to step number 3. So, again, ganun na naman ulit, magto-throwback tayo. We will start with the equations found on simplified circuit number 3. Ito yung makikita mo doon. And then again, elimination method, di natin ito magagamit. Tapos di natin magagamit yung may plus-plus. So dito tayo may equal. Ayan. Okay? So galing dyan, we will be able to get Q1 and Q6. Okay? Ayan. Ito hindi ko lang ito naalis. Kaya nandiyan siya, no? Ayan. Since Q total, nakuha natin yun kanina sa step number 2 is equal to Q1 and it's also equal to Q2, 3, 4, 5 and Q6, we could conclude that Q1 is 1.64 times 10 raised to negative 5 coulomb as well as Q2, 3, 4, 5 and Q6. And from this, nakakuha na tayo ng dalawang individual values, Q1 and Q6. Pero remember, recall lang natin kung ano-ano ba yung mga kailangan natin. We need the C equivalent. So, meron na tayo niyan. We need the total charge. Meron na rin tayo niyan. Tapos yung individual charges. Ano yon? Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, Q5, ako mukhang hindi pa sapat ang space natin at saka Q6. And we also need the V1, the V2, the V3, V4, V5, and V6. Okay? Ayun. So, nagtagumpay na tayo. We have gotten the Q1 and the Q6. More to go, no? Ayan. And next na tayo, next set of throwback equations, paurong. Doon naman tayo sa simplified circuit number 2. Yan, ito yung makikita natin doon. So again, alisin natin yung capacitance, tapos yung may plus plus, tapos ito yung pagpo-focusin natin. Okay? Ayan. So sabi dito, if we get V23, V2345, we would be able to get V23 and V45. Okay? So, paano natin kukunin si V2345? Hindi naman siya given. Again, gagamitin natin to. We need Q2345 na na-equate natin or na-identify natin kanina as just equal to Q total. So, meron na tayong Q2345. Meron ba tayong C2345? Of course. We have solved that in here before getting the equivalent capacitance. No? Na-solve na natin yun kanina. Nung nagsusolve pa lang tayo ng equivalent capacitance. So, makukuha natin si V2345. Ayan. So, V2345 would be equal to Q2345 divided by C2345. We substitute the value of Q total. Ayan yon. Tapos, yung nakuha natin kanina na C2345. Okay? And since we got the value of 4.8 volts, we could conclude that V23 is equal to 4.8 volts and V45 is equal to 4.8 volts. Hala ba? Bakit ganon? Bakit hindi natin, wala tayo nakuhang individual values? Saglit lang, no? Wait ka lang, no? Hindi naman kada throwback mo may makukuha kang individual values. Patience is the key. No? So kung wala ka nakuha dito sa set of equations for simplified circuit number 2, punta ka naman sa simplified circuit number 1. Okay? Ayan. So hindi ulit natin magagamit tong C sa capacitance. Tapos hindi natin magagamit tong may plus plus. Tapos magagamit natin tong Q45 equal to Q4 equal to Q5. But the thing is, galing sa simplified circuit number 2, nasa simplified circuit number 1 na tayo, wala ka na bang nakuhang Q45? Diba? Pero, may nakuha kang V45. Balikan natin Okay, medyo nagloko ang internet. Hindi ko alam kung saang part. Balikan ko na lang din to sa step number internet. Why you do this converge? Okay, enough of the rant. Let's go back. Hindi ko alam kung saan ako banda naputol. So, balikan na lang din natin to. Ito ay simplified circuit, equations to ng simplified circuit number 2. Okay, number 2 to, paurong kasi tayo, no? Ayan. So again, di natin magagamit yung capacitance. Di din natin magagamit ito kasi may plus plus. So ito lang gagamitin natin. Okay? And since wala namang given na V2, 3, 4, 5, we have to solve for it given that we know Q2, 3, 4, 5 previously kasi equal lang naman siya sa Q total. Tapos, meron din naman tayong C2, 3, 4, 5 na na-solve natin on our way to solving the equivalent capacitance of this whole circuit. Okay? Ayan. So, pwede na natin siyang ma-solve. We substitute and then we get V2345 is 4.8 volts. And since equal nga siya sa V23 at V45, yung V23 natin ay 4.8 volts din as well as V45. Now let's proceed to simplified circuit number 1 equations, no? So again, di natin magagamit yung sa capacitance at saka yung sa voltage. Kaso previously, yung nakuha natin is voltage tapos di natin magagamit dito. What should we do? Okay? So kailangan nating mahanap yung Q45. Kasi pag nakuha natin yung Q45, may individual values ulit tayong makukuha which are Q4 and Q5. So previously kanina, pwedeng pag nag-throwback ka, wala kang makuhang individual values. Pero magli-lead siya para makakuha ka in the next step or in the next step ng individual values. So, para makuha natin yung Q45, base dito sa equation natin, we need C45. Check, na-solve na natin yun kanina, again, when we are trying to solve the equivalent capacitance. And then, si V45 naman, yun yung na-identify natin kanina. Ito, yung 4.8 volts. Since meron na tayong capacitance saka voltage, pwede na. Pwede na nating isolve si Q45. Ayan. Q45 will be equal to C45 times V45. And when we substitute, we get 1.07 times 10 raised to negative 5 coulomb. And since nakuha na natin si Q45 at equal siya kay Q4 at Q5, yun din na magiging value ng Q4 natin at ng Q5 natin. Meron na tayong Q4 and 5. Kanina Q1 and 6. So meron ka ng 1, 4, 5, 6. 2 tsaka 3 na lang yung kulang mo. Tsaka lahat ng voltages. So para mas madali, pwedeng i-summarize mo na siya in, anong tawag doon? In a table. Tapos i-fill outan mo na lang kada moment na may nasusolve kang individual value para hindi ka malilito kung ano na lang yung kulang mo, no? Ayan. So next, doon na tayo sa equations na katabi ng original circuit natin. Ayan. So again, we cannot use C23 and V23. We can only use Q23 because it's equal to Q2 and Q3. Pag nakuha natin si Q23, makukuha na natin si Q2 tsaka si Q3. Makukompleto na natin yung individual charges. Pero ang tanong, meron ba tayong C23? Yes, nasolve na natin yun kanina. How about V23? Doon din, nakuha din natin yun dun sa equations for simplified circuit number 2. Yung V2345 is equal to V23 and equal to V45. Okay? So to get Q23, we just multiply C23 and V23. Ayan siya. And finally, we get the value that is 5.76 times 10 raised to negative 6 coulomb. And that makes us conclude that Q2 will have the same value as well as Q3. Ayan. So, notice na exhaust na natin lahat ng set of equations from simplified circuit number 3 hanggang sa original equation. Tapos, ang na-solve pa lang natin lahat ng ating charges. Wala pa yung voltages. However, again, pwede naman natin gamitin to kapag na-exhaust na natin lahat ng set of equations. Since lahat naman ng individual charges nakuha natin, tapos given naman lahat ng capacitance, masosolve pa rin natin yung individual voltages using this equation. Okay? Now let's get V1, that's Q1 over C1, and we get 16.4 volts. And then for V2, it's Q2 over C2, we substitute and we get 2.88 volts. For V3, that's Q3 over C3, we substitute and we get 1.92 volts. And then we have V4, that's Q4 over C4, substitute and we get 2.68 volts. And then for V5, that's Q5 over C5, we substitute and we get 2.14 volts. And lastly, for the V6, that's Q6 over C6, we substitute and we get 2.73 volts. And finally, we can summarize our answers using a table like this. Yung mga naka-red, yung mga given natin, tapos yung mga naka-black, yun naman yung ating mga na-solve. Okay? Now, thank you for listening to part 3 of our discussion about capacitors in combination circuits. Up next will be the topic for LAP or Learning Activity Plan number 5 about current resistance and electromotive force.